I agree.
Please do not answer. Please, Rutendo.
I agree with you.
In the interest of time, please carry on with the question has been noted. Please finish with this. What's up, everyone? It's Penuel the Black Pen. As you guys have asked, Rutendo, Matinyarare, and Khumalo are going to be sitting today discussing a very, very important conversation that all of us should be having. If anything, I hope the Minister of Home Affairs, Dr. Aaron Motsoaledi, and all the other stakeholders are going to be watching this very, very important conversation, debate, and discussion on foreigners in South Africa and other ancillary topics that would cover this very, very important conversation. A lot of this started on social media, on Twitter in particular, where people like Advocate Khumalo are saying things like he doesn't debate matters of foreigners with foreigners. Rutendo Matinyarare going back and saying, I do not think Advocate Khumalo has the intellectual capacity to debate someone like myself. I'm only here to mediate, not to say much. There have been rumors of between 6 million to 10 million foreigners in South Africa. Stats SA says that we have about 4 million foreigners in South Africa, and they do not distinguish between legal and illegal. And Herman Mashaba, who is the ex-mayor of Johannesburg, has gone on to say there are 15 million undocumented foreigners in South Africa. He later on went to apologize because the number had to do with 15 million undocumented people in South Africa, which includes South Africans as well. I would like the gentlemen to please introduce themselves, and then I think we can kick on. We will start with our visitor in South Africa, Rutendo Matinyarare.
Yeah, I'm Rutendo Matinyarare, the chairman of Zimbabwe Anti-Sanctions Movement and the CEO of Frontline Strat Marketing. And I think I was baited by Ike to come here.
Thank you. Advocate Ike.
My name is Ike. I always call myself Ike. The term advocate, it's too heavy for me. Titles. You know. Sometimes when you hear people saying advocate, doctor this, you must know that after that they're gonna talk nonsense.
Jeez.
Most of the time when people say, so busy to doctor so and so, why am I busy alone?
Yeah.
They know they want to bulldoze all of us, if us intimidated. But other than that, I'm Khumalo, I'm the patriot, and I love this country. And yeah, I will never just watch this country going into flames and being taken advantage of. And yeah, it's him. I call him Benson. I've known Benson for some time. He came here. He said, Benson, when he came here, I was already on the retirement side, because, our generation is the generation that started modeling about 94. When the standard was high, and then about 98, it started to drop 20. That's when they came in.
Wow. Oh, wow.
No, that's why they can know that, in South Africa, they drop standards, Okay, they drop standards in South Africa. So whenever they cannot attain standards, actually, I think it's a global phenomenon. They started complaining about models because, when you're a model, your neck has to be a certain size, your thighs, your waist, and even your looks, you must be contoured, And then they started saying, no, we need a guy next door, and a guy who looks like anybody. That's when some of us, when you go to auditions and they say, no, you're too handsome, we don't want somebody exotic. We want and just a guy who can look like somebody from a taxi rank and all that. Some of us started to pull back. That's when they came in.
I'm glad you're raising this because one of the topics is obviously skills and a skills shortage. Rutendo, your thoughts on the issue of immigration in South Africa as a general?
Okay, that's a good question. For me, the issue of immigration in Africa is where the story starts. A lot of times when the conversation takes place, it's like South Africa is the first place where immigration started taking place. But immigration started taking place the moment Africa started receiving independence. So you've got people like Ezekiel Mpahlele, they left here. You've got the lady that used to be the ex-girlfriend of Nkrumah. He was cheating with her. She was a South African colored lady. And they all left here to go to Ghana because there was no freedom in South Africa. Ezekiel went to be an author and went to really home in his art there. Or Miriam Makeba left, people like Yuma Sekela left. They emigrated into Africa, and then sometimes they would also go to the West. And during the time that we got our independence, we had a lot of South Africans who came into Zimbabwe without papers. And the reason they did it is for the same reason why Miriam Makeba left and got passports in places like Guinea, is that Africa had this OAU that says Africa is for all Africans on a pan-African perspective. So South Africans started coming into Zimbabwe. That's why you had Bob Lady Nzimande, people like Thabo Mbeki, people like Moleketi Mbeki, people like Geraldine Fraser, Derek Heinekom, even white people came and they were living in Zimbabwe, for instance. Others were in Mozambique, others were in Zambia. People like Joe Modise were between Zimbabwe and Angola, and sometimes he would also be found in Mozambique because he was coordinating the camps. So we saw South Africans coming into our countries. And contrary to what many people believe, they were not staying in camps. That's why Joe Gabi died in Avondale, a suburb. He was killed there. He was a major member of the ANC and the MK. He was murdered in a suburb because that's where they were living. And because of them coming into our countries without passports, Zimbabwe took a policy to say we will give them passports. And that's why you see that when we had the Wanke campaign with Bokrisane, together with a detachment, their detachment was actually called the Lutuli detachment, that went into Rhodesia then, trying to create a logistics line that will eventually create bases inside South Africa and some in Rhodesia so that they can supply that line to start organizing an armed struggle in South Africa. When they fought this war, they eventually ran out of food because for 3 months they were fighting and running from the Rhodesians and the British South Africa Company. And when they eventually ran out of food, they ran into Botswana. And Masire arrested, Kama arrested them in Botswana for being illegal immigrants and for having unlicensed firearm because he was pressured by the Rhodesians, the South Africans, and the British. And when he did that, the OAU sent 5 members of a task team into Botswana to go and speak with the prisoners. Bokrisane were given 6 years. Some of them were given 9 years for being illegal immigrants. And the OAU said, no. Since when are Africans illegal immigrants in Africa? And he said, hey, I'm under pressure from the British, I'm under pressure from the South Africans, I don't have an army, these guys can invade me. And they said, no, you have to get these people out of prison. So they were arrested in December 1967, and by March 1968, they were released. Now, you need to see the parallel of this is also happening in South Africa today. After South Africans were arrested in Botswana, which was trying to enforce these colonial borders, and the OAU said no. They were then deported back to Zambia. So already we had this immigration. South Africans were immigrating, moving, without passports, without borders, through these countries. And what happened is that because of them staying in our countries, immediately when we got independence, in Zimbabwe, Mozambique, Angola, the apartheid government immediately went to invade and attack those countries for harboring MK and the ANC. And these countries, instead of refusing to say, now that we're getting attacked, we've just started enjoying our independence. We haven't had the time to enjoy our independence that we fought for. These countries said, you know what? We're not going to tolerate what the apartheid government is saying. We're going to fight. Now, before I finish, you have to understand that the apartheid government had given African countries that were getting independence a choice. They said, listen, guys, you guys are getting independence. We're the most powerful superpower in the region, and the Americans had endorsed them being a superpower in the region. Why don't we create something called the Constellation of Southern African States? We'll create DBSA in 1983 so that it can fund you guys to develop these recently independent countries of yours. We will give you food, we will give you trade, we will give you funding, we'll give you finance, we even give you military protection. And we'll make this a United States of Africa, so to speak, in Southern Africa. You'll be prosperous. We'll have separate development. You recognize the Bantustans. And don't worry about the black South Africans. Worry about your prosperity. And all African countries said, we are going to create SADC instead. Now you need to understand, SADC was created 18 days before Zimbabwe got its independence. But Mugabe had won elections already in March. And they decided that Zimbabwe was the strongest of these countries, with Angola having financial muscle from the oil. And Zimbabwe was asked, will you join CONSAS? And they said, no, we'll join SADC. And immediately the apartheid government said, very good, we're now going to attack you at war. So this immigration thing, which Ike refers to a lot, to say, guys, we just got our independence, we haven't enjoyed. We were worse. Before we got independence, we were already at war for accepting immigration from South Africa, from Africans going into Africa. And we decided that we are going to go to war, we're going to forget our economic well-being, and we are going to fight one of the biggest superpowers with nuclear weapons in this region to ensure that South Africa gets independence. And I think for now, I'll end here, because once South Africa got independence, we expected reciprocity. So now Zimbabwe, for instance, is a country that was associated and linked with being instrumental in bringing down the apartheid government together with Angola and their Cubans. They were instrumental in breaking MNR in Mozambique, where the apartheid government was controlling MNR as part of their proxy militaries, where they had their own people there, including their commandos, to try and destabilize Zimbabwe and Mozambique so that they cannot support the liberation struggle of South Africa. And because of the role played by Zimbabwe, Zimbabwe was hated for defeating Abelungu to get independence in 1980. They were hated for fighting apartheid, hence the apartheid government was endorsed by the British and the Americans to destabilize Zimbabwe and to go to war with Zimbabwe in Mozambique and inside Zimbabwe. And Zimbabwe then became even more of an enemy when they went to Congo to stop Kagame and Museveni from dividing Congo into 5 separate little states. And because of that, we were targeted by the West, by sanctions. We expected our brethren in South Africa to be supportive, to accept the same refugees to come in so that we can be able to bolster ourselves economically while they're blockading our economy. We expected the liberated South Africa to support Zimbabwe in the same way that the apartheid South Africa supported the Rhodesian government by giving them loans, banking facilities. They were talking about the sanctions that were in Rhodesia. They made sure that loans and export markets were opened in South Africa for the Rhodesian government. They gave it military equipment. Right now, Zimbabwe has got sanctions on it by the West that are illegal. These sanctions are being enforced by South African banks. The decampaigning of Zimbabwe is being done by SABC and the white apartheid media. Yet, SABC used to be used to support the Rhodesians. Where is the camaraderie and the understanding of the sacrifice? And I'll finish by saying, in some cultures, they say that if I save your life, if I sacrifice my life for yours, for the rest of your life, you need to remember that you owe me your life and support when I need support. Thina bantu bemnyama have failed to give each other that support in SADC, to the extent that Zimbabwe has been treated like a leper. It has been treated like a rotten potato by neighbors, particularly South Africa, which we treated and gave life and sacrificed our people and took our biggest loan. 60% of the loans that we had in 2000 were taken to fight the apartheid government and to fix the destruction of that government. We're still paying those loans today. They are part and parcel of the loans that we owe the Paris Club. But our brothers would call us illegal immigrants. Our brothers will say that when our people are displaced from economic sanctions into this country, it is not said that they are displaced like you were displaced by apartheid. We are said to be economic migrants. No. Displacement by persecution makes a person a refugee. The fact that they don't know how to apply or they avoid applying for refugee status does not take away their refugee status. It means they must be educated on getting their refugee status. But South Africa should not focus on making them refugees. South Africa must focus on trying to get them legalized according to the Refugee Convention and to fight the sanctions that are displacing them. We should unite like what we did when we fought apartheid.
Thank you, Rutendo. Ike, your general thoughts on immigration and any responses to everything that Rutendo said to now?
It is amazing when people try to rewrite history. They try to revise the history, of which, yeah, it is something else. When he speaks of people going to exile, I can tell you by 94, we had about 25,000 applicators, about 45,000 MK cadres. That will give you the picture of how many people went to exile. It's not the whole country, half of the population who went to exile. Bob Miriam Makeba, mabafika ngale. They continued the struggle. They didn't do garden work. They didn't work at fish and chips. The people whom Benson said they lived in suburb, there are very few, exceptional. Few people in leadership where they lived in Zambia, like Abu Oliver Tambo lived in Zambia. But the rest of their comrades and cadres, they were living in Kuma camps in horrible conditions. Hence, they protested. Hence, the MK killed more of their own than apartheid government killed Umkhonto weSizwe, because they were protesting, saying, when are we going back to South Africa and fight? We cannot be living here in Kuma camps. The situation is horrible. That's why I think in Tanzania, if I'm confusing Tanzania and Uganda, they killed 17 PAC of members because they were saying, we cannot live here, under these circumstances. They were protesting. They were shot. That's why KB Mapaswe was shot. He was running away from those horrible conditions. So when Benson said that we went that side, we are not in that number. And I can tell you, the question of immigration in South Africa, it starts as early as about 1800, when they discovered gold, when they took our land. These multinationals, Cispanabo, Dutch East India companies, and all the companies that came after them. So the Zulus in KZN would not work the farms that they used to own. That's why they brought in the Indians. People in the Northwest, they could not work the mines that they used to own. They said, no, we're not working, because this used to be my mine. How dare, you enslave me now as an employee? Guess who they brought in? They brought in foreigners from Botswana land, from Rhodesia, and that agreement with those governments, it continued even after they had a liberation. That's why you'll find a president like Mugabe. He said you won't be a frontline state. Actually, he hated the ANC with passion. He even fought Joshua Nkomo, saying that they must get rid of the MK military soldiers. So Puza did the same in 1982, because they were looking after their interest. Same as the people of Lesotho in 1985. They were looking after their interest. They said, no, South Africans must go. That's why people like Chris Hani, they were betrayed. Chris Hani was arrested in Botswana because Botswana, post-liberation, they were looking after their own interests because, of course, they depended on South Africa and other things because they are a landlocked country. They needed, to go to the harbor and all that. But they looked after themselves. They put themselves first. Zambia did the same. Zimbabwe did the same. And South Africa today is saying, you know what? Guys, we've been supportive. We've accommodated you since the 1800s. And mind you, South Africans, they never said, people from Zimbabwe, Lesotho, they are traitors, even though they were traitors. Because if I'm on strike and I refuse to work, you bring in replacement labor to work. What is that? But we accommodated that. That's why I'm going to tell me it was bad. Those who wanted, to stay behind post their liberation, they stayed. Those who wanted to marry our sisters, they married our sisters. But we're saying post-1994, that, arrangement cannot happen, where we must carry the burden of other countries. Zimbabwe must take care of its own. Yes, we can support them, when it comes to trade, certain things like about Jubilee 2000, I think it was about Ngonkulu Ndungana, they were going to United Nations saying, cancel the debt, don't impose sanctions. Even some, I think there was movements as far as they used to go there, United Nations, and say, the case of Zimbabwe is a special case, it cannot be punished. So South Africa has done a lot, and we cannot be expected, to carry another country where somebody, if he's pregnant, he must jump the border, come here. And it's very funny when he says they live under sanctions. But the top ZANU leaders, even Mugabe, when he needed medical attention, he went to these European countries until they blocked him. Then he started to go to China. Even Rutendo is here most of the time. While the majority of the people in Zimbabwe, they suffer. They took majority of the land in Zimbabwe. Why are they not working the land? They expel the very same white that they're following here, the very same white that they want to work from, instead of working the land, because you'll think that after taking the land, the most natural progression or natural thing to do is to work on the land, farm the land. They've got gold, they've got diamonds, they've got platinum. What are they doing with it? In fact, they are pushing this cornism, pushing, their comrades, of ZANU-PF, into strategic positions. So South Africa cannot be used, like it was used in the 1800s. South Africa must take care of its own, like Zimbabwe took care of its own. When Robert Mugabe came in, he says, no, South Africans must worry about their struggle. Lesotho did the same when Labua, Jonathan, was even taken out of power by Lechanya. I think that, I'll end there for now.
Thank you. So Rutendo mentions the point of agreements being made historically for us to have borders, whatever the case may be, colonial borders, and whatever agreements we had during liberation struggles. I'd like to hear your thoughts on who should be having these conversations now, because his request is we should be doing the same, having agreements of we will take care of Zimbabweans or other foreigners that want to come here if they have adverse situations at home. The question for me is who should be having these conversations, because there were clearly certain individuals and groups in the past that made certain agreements. And today, here we are now. Who's meant to be having these agreements of whether we allow Zimbabweans and other foreigners in or get rid of them?
It's very fun when you talk of agreements. And you remind me of these Nigerians, guys who are here. Normally they say it Nigeria, they used to donate money for South Africans. That's a 419. They must produce paperwork. Even Rutendo speaks of billions that he cannot prove. There are no receipts, there are no paperwork. It's easy to mention billions and agreements that they've made, with the ANC. And remember, this country don't only belong to the ANC. There's so many people who fought for the liberation of this country. There's the BCM, there's the PAC, and South African people, if there were agreements, they were never consulted. But, nevertheless, we're saying, as countries, we can trade with Zimbabwe. As much as we play soccer now, we play with Zimbabwe as like South Africa versus Zimbabwe. Even with trade, somewhere we'll compete with them, but they cannot, overburden us. With the population of Zimbabwe, all of them coming here, out of 14 plus million, half of them, they are here. We're saying it's too much. We cannot cope,
Who's meant to make these decisions?
The decision about?
About whether they should be here or they should leave.
The government of the day must make those decisions. You cannot just welcome anyone. Our labor laws, our immigration laws must still be adhered. Same as Zimbabwe. They have expelled the ANC guys who went in there. They told them in their face that Zimbabwe is not a province of South Africa. South Africa is not a big brother. ZANU-PF, normally says that. There are so many people who went to Zimbabwe without papers, and recently we had Dr. Maling, without papers. He was kicked out. There are so many people, journalists going there. If you don't comply, they kick you out. But you must also, make sure that we implement our laws. You cannot just come here to fry chips, But at the state level, we can trade with them. They've got gold. We can do other things, to mitigate their circumstances. Like now, I believe that they do have, companies that they did not have, and the retail that they did not have, you know, in the past, coming from South Africa, some going to Nigeria, but ShopRite, you know, the banking, I mean, people used to bank Kumatras. So now at least they now have banking system, a sophisticated the software, and we've given them education. Abu Mugabe used to come here, go for it. What more can South Africa give? I mean, South Africa cannot give to the whole continent, you know, because as a country, when you have a manifesto, you're saying, I'm going to create jobs, I'm going to better the hospital situation, I'm going to, you know, make sure that you've got an infrastructure. If you don't have borders, it means now that you must cater for the whole continent, because the whole continent will come here. Like we've seen people, when they're pregnant, when they need medical attention, they come here, they just show up, you know, and because of our constitution that it's so liberal, that says everyone, you know, who deserves or who requires medical attention must be treated. Everyone who needs a house and, you know, must be accommodated, because it has this everyone. While Zimbabwe's constitution, it has a citizen. You know, there are certain rights that you cannot have, you know, if you are not a citizen. And this issue of Berlin Conference about borders, we've always had borders. There is no way that, you know, people, they've lived without borders. So long as there's mankind, you know, with my house starts there, you know, it ends here. You know, this is my terrain. Even in my house, I know this is my cup. That's a border there. You know, I know this is my teaspoon. I know this is my chair. You know, we have borders everywhere. People are divided by rivers, by language. Even them, they don't get along with the Ndebeles in Zimbabwe. You know, the Shonas and Ndebeles, you know, they've got borders. You know, and some of the borders, you know, are mental. Some of the borders, you know, are by conduct. You know, people are divided by river or rivers. They're divided by mountains. They're divided by language. They're divided by common interest. You normally said shared values. Sometimes our values are not the same. We're divided. So I don't see anything wrong with being divided. You know, obviously, it doesn't mean good if I'm Ndebele, I cannot help a Shona guy when he's like, you know, lying there on the floor. But, you know, a gun must not be put, you know, against my head to go, you know, do 1, 2, 3. This is what the Zimbabweans are doing. They're saying, you know what, you must do this. You know, they come with this entitlement culture. You must do this. You know, that's where, you know, the wheels comes off. You cannot tell us, you cannot dictate to us what is it that we must do. Even if they've helped us in the past, of which they've done very little. Our people had curfews. They were kept in camps. You know, only maybe a few, Slovo, they moved around.
Can you just name one camp in Zimbabwe where South Africans stayed?
You kicked us out.
When?
The camps, you kicked us out in Zimbabwe.
When were you kicked out?
You kicked us out in 1980 when Zimbabwe took over. Mugabe said, you know what, there's, what's this, in Bulawayo, because the MK guys were deployed there, in Bulawayo. You said, who's this guy, Joshua Nkomo? Must get rid of them. Zipra, must get rid of those guys. That's why the Kukura Hunzi also started, because you wanted MK to leave Zimbabwe.
So can I straighten that one out?
Yeah.
It's your turn, Rutendo, please.
All right. So Zimbabwe never kicked out ANC all the way until the end when you get independence. And this is not coming from me. Thabo Mbeki spoke and commemorated Robert Mugabe when Robert Mugabe died, and he gave a speech. And he said, we had a relationship in our training camps in Zambia with MK, while ZANU-PF had a relationship with PAC.
Yes.
So we conducted, during the liberation struggle of Zimbabwe, ANC, MK, ANC, MK, and ZAPU and ZIPRA had a relationship. They even created a command, a joint command together, hence the one.
It was ZIPRA with MK.
And yes. But as we got closer to liberation, because you have to understand, Kuti, first of all, MK Yakona only got into the liberation struggle and began to create camps before our independence because of Zimbabweans, which is ZIPRA. ZIPRA are the ones who were taking them from Botswana and taking them to Zambia, into their training camps, and then eventually they'll start their own training camps. This is why even when the war ended in Zimbabwe, ZIPRA left ANC a house, a flat in Luanda. They left them 2 training camps. Now, these people you're talking about, Zebra, are Zimbabweans.
Yes.
So that's a Zimbabwean contribution. Irrespective of the fact that they are Zebra and Zapu, it doesn't really matter. When the Zebra came into Zimbabwe, they came into Zimbabwe without power. The power that was in Zimbabwe was with ZANU-PF.
No.
Hold on. ZANU-PF is the one who had the power.
After
So
elections.
MK could not have come into Zimbabwe, a new independent Zimbabwe, without the authority of ZANU-PF. They could not operate in Zimbabwe without the authority of ZANU-PF. So hence, Thabo Mbeki said, I was sent to Zimbabwe by Oliver Tambo to go and speak to Emmerson Mnangagwa, who is the current president, who was the head of state security then. And I spoke to him, and we said, how do we collaborate together? How can we, ANC, which was aligned with ZAPU, work with ZANU-PF? And Mugabe said, ZAPU, ZANU-PF, we are one thing. We fought the same liberation struggle. When you were fighting with ZAPU, you were fighting for our liberation struggle. So if you can operate here, you, Thabo, and Mnangagwa, you must sit together and you must determine whether you guys can work together. This is Thabo Mbeki saying that, not Rutendo.
And Thabo Mbeki,
Hold on.
Sorry, wait. Please give him a chance.
So they started working together, and then Thabo Mbeki came back with a report and said, yes, we can work here. Then Mugabe said, right, let us tell you what the problem we have here in Zimbabwe is. We integrated when we got our independence with whites. They are part of our military, they are part of our air force, they are part of our intelligence. And what we are discovering is that 30% of those white people are from South Africa. So we've got boss in Zimbabwe. We've got South African intelligence. So before we can work together, what we're going to do for you is we're going to give you papers. We're going to integrate you into the Zimbabwean system as Zimbabweans. We're going to give you passports. We're going to give you birth certificates so that you look like you're one of us. When your weapons come through from Zambia, we are going to carry them with our military trucks. We're going to put up a base at Beitbridge that is going to assist you to do what was being done at the Wange campaign. Remember, I told you that they came into Zimbabwe from Zambia, into Rhodesia, to establish a base and bases for logistics. The Zimbabwean government said, Mugabe then said to ANC, we're going to fulfill that. And our trucks, our militaries, and your people will wear our military uniforms, and you will do it together. And take these weapons across the country, and we'll leave you at the border. You cross over to Musina. And these are the things that the Zimbabwean government was doing, and the apartheid government knew. That is why the very first thing they do, in the very same year that you are saying that they wanted, that we chased out ANC, is the very first thing that they did is they went and they took arms at what we call the Cranbourne Barracks. They went and put bombs at KG6 in December of our very first year of independence. That very same December, they went and bombed they went and bombed the ZANU-PF headquarters, trying to kill Mugabe and ZANU-PF for supporting ANC and MK. From there, they would then come in 1981. The South African military decided to start attacking neighboring countries. The first attack was Mutola. We're not counting the war that they had already started in Angola, where they started Operation Septic. Operation Septic Tank was happening there, while at the same time in Zimbabwe in 1981, they started the Mutola raid and they attacked Zimbabwe's pipeline and Zimbabwe's railway line. Same day of the Mutola raids. Immediately they started their septic tank operation to take what is called, they wanted to take the southern part province of Namibia, so that the fighters from the southern part of Angola, so that Namibian fighters would not continue to be camped there. While they were doing that, they then went to attack Thornhill Air Base. Zimbabwe had an air base that was called Thornhill. We had just bought 12 new jets from British Aerospace. The South Africans saw those jets as a threat to them because it was going to challenge them into the air. So they sent their commandos to collaborate with these whites we had integrated with. They bombed those jets and they destroyed 6 of those jets. So that was a quarter of our Air Force destroyed and disabled. Why were they destroying and disabling it? Why were they destroying our railway pipeline and our pipeline for oil if Zimbabwe had chased away MK? They were being attacked because they were supporting MK. And remember that when Gukurahundi starts, Gukurahundi was about certain people who were ZAPU being disgruntled about being not integrated into the army. But not everybody could be integrated. Not everybody from ZANU-PF was integrated. But when they began to desert from the army and to start creating a dissident movement, to start a rebellion, the South Africans took advantage of that. And they recruited, using the Rhodesians who were still in Zimbabwe and the South Africans who were in Zimbabwe, they recruited certain black people, gave them arms in training camps, made them kill certain Zanla fighters, and then they were taken by helicopters by the South Africans into South Africa to Paraboa to be trained now as a movement that is supposed to come into South Africa. SABC created what is called Radio Truth. Radio Truth in 1983 starts telling Debeles that Mugabe hates you and he wants to kill you, so you need to leave Zimbabwe, come to South Africa and stay Kwan Ndebele and create the Ndebele Brigade to fight in Zimbabwe. When that happened, Mugabe did not say, Zipra, stop operating with MK. He said, let us now begin to divide the difference between ZAPU and Zipra, who are part of Zimbabwe, and ZAPU and Zipra who've become terrorists and renegades who are fighting the government and trying to overthrow the government. This is when Geraldine Mulegetse comes in, because Joe Gabi had been killed in 1981 in July. Why was he killed? Because he was a part of MK and he was coordinating MK activities in Zimbabwe. Geraldine then comes in and takes over from him. And she is the one who is then told, good, right, we have 3 factions here. We've got factions from ZAPU that have escaped from the military and they want to start an uprising. They are one people. Then we've got something called Super ZAPU that has been created by the apartheid movement, and they are South Africans who are training people, getting them back into Zimbabwe to try and destabilize the country. So we're fighting 2 wars with our own people, some who are being trained in South Africa, coming in with white commandos, coming in with black commandos from South Africa, trying to destabilize Zimbabwe, killing Debeles, trying to make it look like the government of Zimbabwe hates Debeles, and then SABC is giving with the Radio Truth the impression that we are killing Debele people here. So you need to separate MK from these guys. We will allow you to continue to operate, but make sure you understand the rebel movement we've got here. And Geraldine fixed that. So MK continued to operate within Zimbabwe, continue to have IDs, continue to have passports in Zimbabwe. And they continue to operate until you get independence, hence there was the Harare Declaration. While that was happening, Robert Mugabe was the man who was going to the world to articulate, he was the best orator, to articulate South Africa's issue, South Africa's lack of independence, the attacks of the Boers in Southern Africa that were causing problems. That is why you hear in 1987, the ANC headquarters in Zimbabwe was bombed in Avondale. Why would it be bombed if ANC had been dismissed
Can
from
I come
Zimbabwe?
in? Because you're missing my point.
Hold on.
Please finish, Rutendo.
I'm about to finish. Point I'm saying is Zimbabwe fought a war in Matabeleland against terrorists because we were stubbornly supporting ANC and MK, and they continue to be there. They were working there. Cyril Ramaphosa's wife was working as a doctor in Zimbabwe. Mulegetse Mbeki was working at the Herald as a journalist. Blade in Zimbabwe was at the University of Zimbabwe. What is his name? Mkize. Zweli Mkize was working as a doctor in the country. There were so many South Africans who were working there. And these camps that you talk about, I asked you, tell me one refugee camp where South Africans stayed. We went to school with Bosemai, we went to school with many South Africans. They were part and parcel of our society. In my neighborhood, Waterfalls, it was bombed there because there was an MK house that was in the suburb that I lived in, and it killed Zimbabweans because we had houses among our people. Why did the ANC and MK prefer to be based in Zimbabwe? Because our defense was one of the best in the region. They felt safer there than they felt in Botswana, which was easy to attack, in Lesotho, which was easy to attack, in Mozambique, which was easier to attack, until the Zimbabweans deployed 12,000 soldiers for this war against the Boers. Now,
let's allow him return. You've given him a lot of facts, and it's going to be tough for him to respond to
I'm
everything.
just about to finish. So Zimbabwe would not have had to fight two wars in Matabeleland against its own people and terrorists funded by the apartheid government, and a war in Mozambique that started in 1984 and ended in 1992 when you started negotiating at Codesa, if we were not supporting the South Africans.
Thank you. Before you answer, Ike, just as a voice of an ordinary South African, I'm listening to a lot of history. I'm listening to a lot of internal politics in Zimbabwe. I'm listening to a lot of stories about elite political leaders, etc. The ordinary South African, how important is it for them? Or rather, in your answer, if you can please address how important it is for the ordinary South African to understand the history. Is it relevant to them? Should they care? And after listening to all the politics, is the issue political, or is it just the issue of the economy, where the argument could be from a South African, fix your economy or your economic sanctions? All this other political stuff and history is just a sideshow. Your only issue is getting economic prosperity so you can go back home. But please feel free to address them as you wish.
Yeah, I just wanted to address this. The issue of the frontline states playing a minimal role, being attacked, nobody's disputing that. We all know about the cross-border raids. We all know about the South African Defence Force going to Mozambique, going to Lesotho, killing people there, but primarily they were looking for MK and the PAC. And to say that ZANU-PF was friendlier to the ANC, maybe friendlier to the PAC, because even Dabengwa also mentions that when Thabo Mbeki said that, ZANU-PF, they were kind to them. No, they even refused the MK to use Zimbabwe as a transit to attack South Africa. MK, they preferred Zimbabwe to be there so that they can come to South Africa and use Zimbabwe as a stepping stone. But Mugabe said no. He refused them that permission. So, when you ask me a question about should South Africans worry or concern themselves about the politics of Zimbabwe, South Africans, they're informed, they know the history of Zimbabwe, how it got liberated, but South Africans, they say, as much as these countries, they put their people first. Swaziland did the same. It was a hostile country. Mugabe became hostile. He was forced, even when it comes to Harare Declaration, it was Kaunda who was imposing, let us have this discussion with the Afrikaners. And even Kaunda imposed those conditions to the ANC. Abu Krisani, they wanted to fight. Kaunda at that time was viewed as a CIA spy or as a Western spy. He said, no, let's talk to these guys. Let's go to South Africa, because Kaunda himself was also protecting his interests that he had with South Africa, be it the railway lane, being its shipment. So therefore, he did not want to destabilize those trade dealings that he had with the Pretoria administration. Hence, he forced the MK and APLA to come and negotiate. And our negotiations, it doesn't come because ZANU-PF was fighting, ZANU-PF was nowhere. Mugabe was nowhere in Angola. It was the Cuban and the Soviets. If you have to understand the struggle of South Africa, you have to go to the Cold War. As they say, when two elephants fight, it is the grass that suffers. So in 1985, when Gorbachev met Ronald Reagan, they decided they're going to end the Cold War, or Russia or the Soviet Union, they were losing the war. So they were becoming a capitalist. And then it became, a natural progression. Even the people that they were supporting on the ground, MK was supported in the Soviet. PAC was supported by China. America was supporting, the National Party. They had to make peace. The same way as, be it in Mozambique, we have Utlakama fighting Nabo Shamora Machel. They also had to make peace, because Russia and America, they were making peace. And hence the negotiations, which was a sponsored program, the 1992-94 project of Codesa. So, as South African, for me, I'm saying Zimbabweans, we understand, what they went through, being a transit state, but they had to take care of their own. That's why they were hostile to us at the end and forced us, even if, it means that you must negotiate, because they were looking after their interests. Lesotho did the same, That's why Labua Jonathan was defeated. Samora Machel did the same. He signed a Komati Peace Accord 1984, to say you'll get rid of this PAC, ANC, they must go back. Tanzania did the same. So as a South African, we're saying that we cannot, be overburdened continuously in perpetuity by the issue of Zimbabwe. We can help them where we need to help them, but they must fix their own country. I mean, most of them, they claim to be refugees, but it's very fun in December time they go to Zimbabwe. What type of a refugee is that? Good Friday, they go back to Zimbabwe, they come here to work. And when they come here, they are not even, sympathetic to the South African cause. I mean, you look here in town, you don't see a South African anymore. You look at certain industries, you don't see a South African. You see Malawi, you see Zimbabweans. There's never been a case where South Africans went in numbers, went into other people's countries, and when they get there, they undercut. If I'm saying I'm earning 10,000 a month and I take 2,000 rand a month, there's never been a case, where South Africans, I don't recall a case where they own a city like Hillbrow, where they own a city like Pietermaritzburg, where they own, Cape Town, where South Africans are now squashed into townships, and you look into the CBDs like Johannesburg, you see Zimbabweans, foreigners. There's never been a situation where South Africans went to Burkina Faso and started selling fake products, started doing crime. Those are the issues that are concerning to South Africans, saying, guys, we understood at first that you were facing a problem coming with sanctions. The West was hostile to you. But we thought that when you come here, you're going to understand our situation and work with us. But this is a different kind. This is not a Thomas Sankara that we receive. We thought that you're going to receive people like, Petrus Lumumba. But when you come here to terrorize us. Most of brutal crimes. I mean, even Faith Mazibuko said that, if you are in Johannesburg, in the north of suburb, when there's a crime happening in a particular way, I know immediately what is a Zimbabwean. And people will say that crime doesn't have nationality, crime is crime. No, crime has nationality. There's a certain crime that is pushed by a certain nationality, like drug and prostitution. If it was happening before, it was not so prevalent, but we know that Nigerians are there. If there's a brutal crime, when it comes to explosive cash in transit, I know that I'll find a Zimbabwean. If there's a South African, out of 20, I'll find one South African. And South Africans are aggrieved by that. If there's fake products, Adidas, be it eggs, I now see kuna maqanda werapha, iqanda lakhona liboli. So South Africans said, we've never seen that, And people, the woke nation, they will tell you that you're generalizing, When you talk, statistics by nature, they're generalizing. You're rounding off. When I'm saying there are 60 million people in South Africa, there's 16 million plus, but I'm rounding off. And you look into the crime, because this is the place where most people make a mistake. They'll say, no, there are so many South Africans in jail, But you look at a particular crime. You say, who's doing this crime? Building hijacking. In spite of which there are many South Africans, because it's their country anyway, you'll find more South Africans in jail. But if you go to building hijacking, we don't know building hijacking. We've never written buildings for sale. You go to Dubai to work for 3 months. When you come back, there are Zimbabweans inside your house. They stay for a certain number of period. And people, they specialize in learning our laws. They are so good when it comes to that. They study our laws, about Pi Act. They know that if you stay for a certain number of days, it's no longer trespassing. You need a civil court action now to go to court. When you go to the police and say, somebody, I know, in London for 3 months. For how long? He says, no, it's been there for you. I say, we cannot touch that person. Go to court. And now it must cost me money to evict that person. To go to court today, if it's 2023, it means you're going to see the judge, 24, maybe about 2025, 26. That's when your matter is going to be heard, because there's a backlog, and it's even now worse because they're using online courts and all that. When you get there, and you still might not win, because the constitution of this country says before you evict a tenant, they must look into the situation of this person. Does he have children? You know, do they go to school? The interests of the children come first. The guys are so smart, they impregnate quickly. Rutendo's got, I know him. He had a girlfriend.
No personal shots, please. No personal shots. Let's keep it general. Let's keep it general. No personal shots.
He's got kids in South Africa.
No, I don't mind.
No.
No sharp.
No children and personal things, please.
No sharp. I'll stay off that. But most of the guys, you know, they come here, you know, and their marriages of convenience, you know, or conveniences. You know, they're so smart because they learn these things, you know. And South Africans now, they look and say, no, it cannot happen, you know. And we call these guys our brothers. You know, what type of a brother who comes to your house and take your girl child who's 14 and make her a prostitute? What type of a brother who can take your child and send your child to China carrying drugs because this child is poor? That's not a brother. You take to China where he's going to be hanged. I don't have that mentality. I see a 22-year-old, I see my child. Some of them, they look at me, your mom, you know, I'll talk to your mom, not you, you know, because I've got that thing with this is my child. So that's what South Africans are saying. I'm saying these guys who are coming here, you know, they don't have the patriotism, they don't have the Pan-Africanism that us, we're supposed, you know, we are told, you know, we are all, you know, Africans, you know, Pan-Africanism. It is them who've killed, who've taken out Abu Petrus Lumumba, and they continue business as usual. It is them who've killed Thomas Sankara, who was preaching Pan-Africanism. It is them who've taken Kwame Nkrumah out of power. All these guys were talking Pan-Africanism, continental unity, you know, like in 1963 when they started the OAU, which, you know, continental unity, we are all Africans. All those leaders who were pushing for that, taken out of power. But now, when it comes to South Africa must push that Pan-Africanism that they are not pushing in their own countries. They must push unity that they are not pushing in Zimbabwe. You know, the Ndebelés don't want to see Shonas, even to this day. You know, the Hausas and the Igbos, and they are fighting, you know, up to this day. So it cannot be that, you know, we are forced about this unity that Bona, they are using to gain here, like the term xenophobia. You know, when people say we are xenophobic.
Let me address some of the things that
xenophobia
saying,
only
xenophobia.
Yes,
He'll finish now.
Yeah, xenophobia is a term. That's why I hate this term. You know, what is xenophobia? Because it's only used against South Africans. When Zimbabwe, Robert Mugabe said, retail work, certain jobs are for Zimbabweans, nobody said anything. In Botswana, when they say we are putting Botswana first, nobody's saying anything. In Kenya, you know, the president wakes up tomorrow and says, from now on, Nabokana, certain jobs will be for our citizens first. Nobody's talking xenophobia. But in South Africa, you know, there's this term that is used against us, which is unfair.
Thank you very much. Sorry, Rutendo, before you respond, I'd like, if possible in your response, for us to increase the scope from just Zimbabweans. I know there's a lot of Zimbabweans in South Africa, but to discuss all the foreigners that are here, largely African, because it seems like from what I hear on the ground, it's mostly African foreigners because they live in the townships and the squatter camps closer to the black people that complain. But if you'd like to also include some of the Asian, the Bangladeshis, Pakistanis, and maybe even some of the Europeans as well. If you may, in your response, increase the scope beyond Zim.
Before you answer, I've never debated with somebody who's on Google. Every minute he goes to Google. And
I'm writing.
I think it should be allowed. If you want Google, it's fine.
I'm writing notes of what you're saying so that I can address some of the issues.
No, it's fine.
Because I think one of the important things about this debate is a lot of people thought you and I are coming to fight here. What they didn't realize is you and I are coming to discuss and share ideas.
Yes.
And get people, the academians especially, to research a little bit more. So I agree with you on some of the issues that you're raising. And I have made a video confirming what you're saying, where I was denouncing foreigners who come into this country to perpetuate crimes. Especially Africans. I was condemning Africans, knowing fully well that the biggest crimes in this country are done by Europeans. 5 million Europeans in this country are all criminals who perpetuated apartheid, who benefited from apartheid, and are the reason why you continue to be dispossessed. Reason why, as educated as you are as an advocate, Ike, I know that you don't get certain briefs just because you're black. I know that you don't get certain jobs just because you're black, irrespective of how competent you are. Those criminals continue to perpetuate the worst crimes in this country. They continue to perpetuate the dispossession. They continue apartheid. But I'm not going to talk about them because they are not our brothers. They are our enemies. And that's why I agree with you to say we denounce our brothers who come in the name of Pan-Africanism to sell our girls, to turn a South African child into a prostitute. It's unacceptable. Will never be acceptable. And I agree with you when you say that crime we must be identified as more heinous because it's being done by my brother. It's more heinous for a black person to come and destroy a black society. I agree with you. And we must denounce that. And I've made videos denouncing that. And I got a person in America called Gary Twala to put a bounty on my head for 10,000 rand for them to kill me in Hillbrow. He gave an instruction. Because in my articulation, I said, guys, we know who's causing crimes in South Africa. And maybe I was unfair to say it's Ndebeles, but this is something that has been said even by the police. And that almost got me killed. Till today, I've got a bounty on my head. But what is ironic is people think I said it because I hate Ndebeles. I've got a stab wound on my arm here. And I got that stab wound rescuing a Ndebele bouncer who was being stabbed to death by 2 colored boys. His Ndebele brothers were standing. And when we wanted to jump in, they tried to stop us, saying, he thinks he's smart, let him die. I sacrificed my life, and I would have died. I was willing to take a knife for him. But let me address some of the issues that we raised here. So that you said frontline countries did minimal. Minimal. And I want to say, when you have 600,000 people who died in frontline states, 100,000 of them died in Mozambique, majority of them then died in Angola, and then the others died in Zimbabwe, Botswana, and so forth. That is not minimal. When a nation like Zimbabwe decides to say, right, we know what we are fighting, we will support the ANC and MK, and it's not true that they refused to transit MK stuff. Thabo Mbeki says it, not me. They continued to transit stuff for MK with our military trucks, with our military equipment, to the extent that in 1986, there was a bombing in Musina. And Margaret Thatcher wrote to Robert Mugabe, challenging him. Could you are assisting when at the ANC to bomb and to have bombing raids in South Africa, yet you said you were not going to support them militarily. And Mugabe told her, you are mad. You're going to ask me about a bombing just because it killed seven white people. But all along, when the Boers are killing black people in South Africa, killing black people in surrounding countries, you never say anything. We support more the morality of the freedom of the black South Africans, much more than we support the issue of trying to protect white interest. What was he saying? He was saying that I might have been saying in rhetoric, might have been saying as PR that I'm not going to support ANC and MK, but we are going to do it because we want freedom. And that's why we deployed 12,000 soldiers to Mozambique to fight an MNR or Renamo that was funded and controlled by your military intelligence here. When we went to Gorongosa and we fought what is called the Battle of Casabanana, we found bodies of white commanders there, white commandos, white soldiers from South Africa. Among those forces were black South Africans who were part of the Regis. They were trainers there. Some of them were actually part and parcel of that fighting. In Renamo were Zimbabweans as well. Why would Zimbabwe fight such a war of deploying 12,000 soldiers for a period of 7 years if that's a minimal sacrifice? And remember that this was a sacrifice of sending our soldiers after they had destroyed our planes. We had to replace those planes. And to replace those planes cost us over $1 billion then, which in today's terms is over $3 billion. To deploy those soldiers, we were spending over $100 million every single day that we were in Congo. We were in Mozambique. For South Africa. Now remember, that's money that could have been used to build schools. That's money that could have been used to build roads. That's money that could have been used to advance the infrastructure of Zimbabwe. And while we were fighting that war, Anglo-America was in Zimbabwe, sabotaging the economy. Barlow was in Zimbabwe, sabotaging the economy. Old Mutual was in Zimbabwe, sabotaging the economy because there were economic sanctions. The sanctions in Zimbabwe doesn't start now. They started with the apartheid government. And they destroyed the economy. So we lost within that period over $4 billion at that time, which in today's money is over $11 billion. That's not a minimal sacrifice because that's money we could have used. So we did not, Mugabe did not look out for our interests. They looked out for your interests before ours because Pan-Africanism says the freedom of South Africa is more important than for us to be free while they're still under subjugation. Let me just address some of the other issues. So that's not a
sorry,
minimal.
Rutendo. Is your response going to be short?
Yeah.
Will you allow him?
No, I was
Because he
saying
needs
to
to
him,
continue.
when you mention sanctions,
Yes.
you cannot, saying another country owes you because you were sanctioned. South Africa was sanctioned, by United States, by many countries. But today, South Africa doesn't say, because during sanctions, we lost so much money. Britain owes us this money. Lesotho didn't work with us. So
But
it's
you know why?
irresponsible.
But you know why? Do you know why?
We are an
Because the
independent-
sanctions that were on South Africa were UN sanctions. They were legal sanctions. They were not sanctions to punish South Africa for decolonizing. They were sanctions to punish the South African government so they can not replace its military equipment and cannot continue to be a menace, and so that its economy will eventually grind to a halt for them to start negotiating. And remember, you said that the apartheid government did not negotiate because of Zimbabwe. It negotiated because the Russian system fell apart. That's not true. That's not true because Russia was not involved in Mozambique. But South African apartheid government decided to destabilize this whole region in what they called a cordon sanitaire of confusion, or a buffer zone of confusion. They went to attack in Mozambique, to attack Zimbabwe and Mozambique. They were trying to starve Zimbabwe so that it cannot be able to export and cannot be able to get fuel. They were also attacking in Zimbabwe to ensure that they grind Zimbabwe's economy to a halt while sabotaging all the traffic that was now passing through South Africa after they'd closed our way to Mozambique. The intention was to ensure that Zimbabwe is brought to a grinding halt together with Mozambique so that they cannot sustain MK and cannot use their armies to fight them and eventually bring MK together with them to attack South Africa. They did the same in Angola. They did the same in Namibia. When they got defeated, when Matsanga or Renamo was defeated in Mozambique, and remember it was being funded by the Boers and the CIA who were coming from the north in Comoros Islands, they were also giving weapons. When they were defeated, the Boers no longer had a protection on the east. And that defeat coincided with their defeat in the west, where they were defeated by Angola. And the moment they were defeated in Angola, they lost their military equipment. They lost jets. They lost helicopters. There is a write-up by the South African Air Force of that time that said that it got so dangerous for them to fly their helicopters over Angola that they only went and flew only when they had strategic interests and it was not so dangerous. Their military equipment was destroyed. And they got to a point where they realized that once we've been lost our war in Angola, when we now have to go back home to defend South Africa, and Angola, Zimbabwe, Cuba, and Namibia now come and attack us on our own land, we're not going to be able to sustain that war.
There was no Zimbabwe in Angola. What I'm saying
No.
is...
Listen, you need to listen to my argument before you go. So my argument is this.
Are these some of your other points? Sorry.
Yes.
Okay.
No.
I just wanted to make sure that you finish your points.
This is just to explain
Let me finish
what...
up
this,
for him.
This, wait. This is to explain...
Because we interrupted you. I wanted to
Yeah.
make sure you finish your point.
So I just wanted to explain that there were three wars that were happening at the same time. There was Mozambique, there was Zimbabwe, Matebeleland, and there was Angola and Namibia. So that's 4 wars. The Boers were fighting all of them. Some, they sent their military, like in Angola and Namibia, they sent their military. They sent some of their military to Mozambique, but they relied more on the rebels that they had trained at Paraboa. And their defeat there was a defeat of their people, their army. And they did not have any replacements to put back there, so that side was lost. And so the whole purpose of having these wars was to protect South Africa, to keep this barrier of wars, to keep these countries from attacking South Africa on its soil. So once they lost and that flank was opened, like in chess, they no longer could defend themselves by a war in Mozambique, a war in Zimbabwe. And eventually when they lost in Angola, they were left open because they had to come back home, and now they had to defend home. And now they were in the position that the Rhodesian government was, they would have never won that war. And remember, you said that Russia negotiated, well, this is part and parcel of the points. You said that Russia started negotiating, but before 2 seconds. You said Russia started negotiating in 1986. Do you know when Glasnost happened? Or when the Soviet Union fell?
The perestroika.
In 1992.
Let me inform
1992.
you.
So from 1986, which is the time that South Africa went under economic sanctions and they were losing their wars.
Let me inform you for free of charge.
You're going to inform me. Let me lay my
let's give each other a chance.
Let me lay my facts. So you say...
Because I keep forgetting things that I want to say. Because
that's why you should be taking notes.
No, because he's
I
got a white
understand.
paper.
Rutendo, if you can, and if you're going to keep it short, please allow him because he's not keeping notes.
Okay.
Because he'll forget your points.
So I'm saying negotiations between America and Russia were not negotiations. America and Russia were talking. They were not negotiating. 1986 all the way until we get to 1991, Russia was still there. But Cuba was not using Russia. Cuba went into Angola without the authority of the Russians.
It was told by Russia to go to Angola.
If you listen to Fidel Castro, he says the Russians didn't want us to go in there, but we went to support our black brothers. But having said that, my point is this. The apartheid government was losing by the time we get to 1988. They were losing the war. They were losing the battles. Their strategic objective of going to remove the NPLA government, it failed. The strategic objective of removing Frelimo in Mozambique had failed. The strategic intent of continuing these wars so that people don't fight on South African soil had lost. That's why they had to pull out of Namibia, they had to pull out of Angola. When you retreat, you've lost.
Let's allow him, Rutendo.
Zimbabwe never declared a war in South Africa. So is Mozambique. South Africans, you're talking of the era of proxy wars. The world was divided between socialism or the communist and the capitalist. These are proxy wars. Cuba, it was the agent of Russia. South Africa was sponsored by the West, be it Britain and America. When Gorbachev got into power, the mid-80s, 85, 86, he started reforms in Russia called the Glasnost and Perestroika, which means transparency and reforms and political reforms. He went to the States to meet Ronald Reagan. That's when they started talking about peace, because Russia was exhausted. They were facing a bankruptcy. And then they made peace and said, you know what, Russia must withdraw, their support from all these ground forces that they had. In Mozambique, they were supporting Frelimo. That's why South Africa attacked them, because South Africa was supported by America. In Angola, the same thing. Dos Santos was supported by Russia.
So let's ask you a question.
Americans.
If Zimbabwe was the one fighting the war in Mozambique, who was supporting Zimbabwe?
I'm saying ZANU-PF, they trained in China. And ZAPU was, the Soviet. But after ZANU won, of which it caught the ANC by surprise, because the ANC wanted ZAPU, they wanted Mr. Nkomo to win. But anyway, they worked with Mugabe post-liberation. Hence, Mugabe still had, that animosity, and hence it did not give them that leeway. So, when you say Zimbabwe, they might have sent maybe a few troops, but what I'm saying is that they never declared
12,000.
They never declared a war in Mozambique.
Maybe they assisted with an intelligence, they assisted, with equipment here and there. Unlike in Angola. In Angola, there was a fully fledged war.
Same as Mozambique.
It was
and it's important for us to set those facts straight.
In Mozambique, it was known. If you ask anybody, it will tell you that it was Alfonso Dlagama and Machel.
Yes, but he was representing the South Africans, and they were trained here in South Africa. They were equipped by the South Africans. They were trained in South African camps. They had South African commandos
Zimbabwe,
with them.
They were hiding their footprints. But when you're talking as if like we were like children, all these countries, they were fighting on our behalf.
They were. Because Zimbabwe had no reason to go and fight in Mozambique without South Africa.
Let's allow each other, guys, please.
It's like we were children sitting here, and as if,
but remember, he was just supposed to make a point. Now he's taken over from...
Or you still want to continue? Okay, I'll come in.
So I have got issue with what you're saying, because when you deploy 12,000 people, that's a war. And when you deploy your jets and your helicopters, and you have to fight battles like the Battle of Casa Banana and take Gorongosa.
Can I verify the number?
Yeah? What's that?
The 12,000. Where is there a place where I can go to verify the number?
I think we can check it after the show.
Even now,
he stated
you can Google.
it.
You can
No, we can do it after in the
Google.
interest of time.
So when you see the Battle of Gorongosa, that was a major battle. Then you see the Battle of Mutarara, where we eventually finished Renamo and destroyed their camps after they tried to divide Mozambique into two. They were defeating Renamo. Renamo couldn't stand a chance. That's how serious these guys were, and that's how well trained.
I'd like
they
to
were.
come in here, Rutendo.
But before on the Soviet training, Zimbabwe was actually equipped by the British Army. By the time it was in Mozambique, it was equipped by the British Army and a bit of Chinese equipment and Russian equipment. That is the ironic thing about the situation there.
I'd just like to come in here as a South African and as the people that were commenting on social media. I'm happy for us to have a historical debate and discuss some of the fights and the wars and the civil unrest in various countries. In the interest of time, I'd like us to please focus on the foreigners issue and maybe give it 30 more minutes to talk about the ZEPs, the permits, to speak about, I know you'd already mentioned in the beginning, what you think the solutions should be for the current situation moving forward, and the same from Ike as well. And I'm going to welcome, after everyone has watched on social media this debate, for people to bring forth questions, to clarify certain things, to share their opinions. And hopefully with those questions and those clarifications, we can maybe set another time.
Yeah.
But for the interest of maybe the last 30 minutes we have, I'd like from both of you to hear, we've got a situation right now.
Yeah.
What are the potential solutions? If you can maybe re-emphasize the ones you raised, I can then bring his own solutions. Who should be driving them? I know he mentioned government, but in particular, because some of the issues, it seems, are political. ANC, ZANU, ZEPRA, PAC, etc. So, again, as an ordinary South African, a lot of ordinary South Africans don't want to debate the numbers and who was fighting who. And they are saying today, I'm struggling, there are foreigners here. There are Zimbabweans saying, our country, currently we're struggling in our country. What is the solution for South Africans, for Zimbabweans and other foreigners in SADC and the rest of the country, from my side?
I think at the end of the day, hold on, let me lay down to just calm down my argument and then go into this discussion. So what is happening and why we're having this discussion is we're trying to say South Africa cannot look at itself in isolation. Zimbabwe's problem doesn't start now.
Yes.
Zimbabwe's problem started with the liberation struggle for South Africa. The amount we sacrificed, the fact that we're still paying 60% of our debt now still involves paying off debt for what we had to take to liberate South Africa because we had to fight wars.
And you want black South Africans to know this?
We want, the situation we are with black South Africans and South Africans in general is that, remember guys, we're like friends. Ike and I are friends. He's not working. His wife is pregnant. And then I give him money. He stays in my house. We do everything together for me to wait for him to pick himself up. And then when I pick myself up, Ike goes and creates a partnership with one of the enemies that he had that didn't even assist him during that time, which is the apartheid companies that South Africa embraced the moment it got independence. The same Anglo-Americans who were sabotaging us. They created these companies, they held hands with these companies, they did not ask for reparations from these companies, they did not break up these companies. These companies are now coming into our country on the back of SADC agreements, on the back of COMESA agreements, and they're destroying and sabotaging. South Africa did not destroy the mercenaries. Were executive outcomes. They go and do their dirty work in Congo, where we deploy again to go and fight the division of Congo so that we keep SADC as one, so that we don't have Americans in our territory. And guess what? South Africa is supporting more executive outcomes. South Africa is the one with Bo Simon Mann and Bo Mark Thatcher who want to go and overthrow people in Guinea, in Equatorial Guinea. And we say, guys, you continue with these apartheid companies to destroy other countries around you. Lapa, we liberated you. Lapa, you didn't pay any reparations. How do we recover? Because at this expanse, when white farmers began to leave Zimbabwe, you allowed them to money launder money that shouldn't have left Zimbabwe, that should not have left Zimbabwe according to the exchange controls. You allowed it to come into South African banks. Your South African banks are the ones imposing sanctions on Zimbabweans, who they haven't tried. They haven't taken to court, they haven't done anything, but just because somebody is on a sanctions list for the Americans, illegal sanctions, South Africa blocks them. Those are our business people who are supposed to build. Those are the business people who are supposed to build our companies. When we're trying to market Zimbabwe, it's the SABC.
It's everybody's fault but Zimbabwe.
No,
but it's amazing. Can I say
hold
this?
on, I'm about to finish. I'm about to finish.
The time is going to be finished.
But the problem is, how do you guys say you want us to recover and go back to our country when you are part of the people destroying us?
I'm trying to summarize what you're saying, Rutendo. It seems like your issue is our political leadership went back on what they were meant to do, and they worked with people that all the black people were kind of fighting. That's your issue. And I'm only raising this because we have to think about the ordinary South African and why they need to listen to any argument from either side. And I want to isolate, because if we're saying we're brothers, as an example, and Ike is going to come in, we need to know, are we brothers, and then who is the issue? Because currently it feels like the issue is Zimbabweans, and you feel like South Africans have forgotten history, but it seems like it's at the top, where the political leaders have become blind.
It's backed up by even the citizens.
But the citizens won't know.
Are enjoying freedom now because of the sacrifices made. And those sacrifices that are made are not acknowledged. And the destruction that happened is not acknowledged. So that when you now need to help this brother to raise up after they helped you and got bankrupt helping you, you are now refusing to help them. And the question is, so how do you expect the situation to change? Not only that, when we are trying to build this Zimbabwe, market it better, get the economy going, the banks to stop sanctioning
Can I say
us.
this?
You are the same people who are supporting the negativity.
Can I say this?
Campaigning us. You have got SABC talking nonsense and lying, stopping people like Rutendo from coming on because they don't want the truth to be known.
SABC is dominated by Zimbabweans, and they've been coming here, and they block me. I cannot talk on SABC. Like all the media houses, they block people like me. They've got views of Zimbabweans. And I'm saying that if South Africa owes Zimbabwe, they've paid them enough.
How?
Zimbabweans, they've been coming here since the days, when we discovered gold, they come here. In our hospitals, they come here, doing all sorts of crimes. Thabo Mbeki, at some point when he was still a president, Eskom wanted money. I think it was about 6 billion per annum. That was owed.
Not 6 billion, 600 million.
6 billion. I'm talking about 6 billion.
Let's allow him, Rutendo.
But I can't speak you. That's what they do, even in our radio stations. So 6 billion rands. They wanted it from Eskom annually. Mugabe said he won't pay that money because Thabo Mbeki, he's got mines that side. And remember, Thabo Mbeki didn't do illegal mining there. He followed all the laws.
Can we verify this?
We can verify after, please.
Yes.
Please, let's allow.
And we cannot suffer in perpetuity. And even if you claim to have helped us, we are independent people. We can deal with whoever that we want to deal with. Most people in Zimbabwe, I don't know, they begrudge us because they say maybe we are cozy with white people. They expelled white people. And I can tell you, most South Africans, they worked even during apartheid in white companies that you want us, to antagonize, that your people come to work for. But you want South Africans, ordinary South Africans, to antagonize white people. I mean, it is white companies employing the most here. Even during apartheid, South Africans' lives were better, or it was better during apartheid than it is now.
But can I ask him a question on this issue? Just
Please
a
wait,
question.
are you
Just
done?
a
Can you
question.
ask a question?
And
I'll continue.
on that-
Can you ask a question?
I want to
Yeah,
ask
can.
a question.
Okay.
But Ike, these companies you are bragging about, these whites you are bragging about, they are building these companies by destroying companies in Zimbabwe. They are destroying companies and competition in Zimbabwe. That's why they are able to look after you. Tina Zimbabweans, we don't want white people. We want what they stole, which is in your banks. When you took the money from the white farmers, what do you call that?
I was talking about during apartheid, long before
Oh, yeah.
you started.
But let's
preaching-
come to
you
this where
started
you're
to
saying
preach
we are following
about
white
open
people.
borders. I'm saying that when
You
South
said we're
Africa,
following white people.
South
Allow
Africa,
Rutendo.
South Africa was sanctioned. We did not blame everyone else, as they say with Apure Makaplan. They came up with petrol from coal. What
And the Buddha fell.
What is so difficult about Zimbabweans, in facing inwards and say, okay, it's fine, we understand what the external can do, the external international world can do, but we've got farms, we've taken the farms, we've got gold, we've got mines, What's so difficult about Zimbabweans taking care of their own people? Actually, they'll be fighting for ZEP.
I'll answer that
They
question
want-
because you
I mean,
asked it.
Wait,
They want to
But I
use-
need to answer that question.
They want to
That's
use
fine,
South
that's fine.
Africa as a social security, including Malawi, Lesotho. And South Africa cannot, be abused under these ZEPs, which is illegal. And by the way, ZEPs was introduced by another Zimbabwean minister, Malusi Nkanyezi Kikamba.
That's a conspiracy theory.
I asked him this question. I asked Malusi.
People
ukuthi-
said you are in Ndebele from Zimbabwe.
I asked Malusi Nkanyezi Kikamba, was he born in Zimbabwe?
They also say you are a Zimbabwean. They say your father was part of the Gukurahundi people who were taken by
I
the
can
Boers.
verify where I was.
But
I can
do you get where
verify-
I'm going with
I
that?
can verify. No, but I'm saying that I asked him personally, and he could not answer. I said, Faye Kimento said so, and there was information that has been erased anyway, Yeah, but I'm saying that South Africans, they cannot, suffer in perpetuity because Zimbabwe has a crisis that they are not willing to solve.
But let me answer your question.
Allow him to finish, Rutendo.
Well, no, 2 seconds.
Wait,
I
Rutendo,
wanna-
he needs
I wanna
to give
ask
you
him-
permission.
I wanna
He needs to
ask
give
him-
you
I want
permission.
to ask him for
Okay,
permission.
But he
what's-
needs, sure.
I want to
Can you
answer
ask-
one
can you ask-
question you've
okay,
been
it's fine.
asking.
Thank
Right.
you.
You said, why do Zimbabweans run from the mines and the farms and the platinum? Zimbabweans have got the land, the platinum, but they need capital to run those things. And I'm gonna finish 2 seconds. And the issue is that when we were under apartheid, when we were under colonialism and apartheid, we were looted over $1.5 trillion by the same whites, many of them were
Everybody's
here.
looting
So
you.
people are coming and looking for that capital that was looked at, and we want to work for it and just return it and invest in Zimbabwe, like the Jews do, like the Irish do, and like the British do, who are 5 million here in South Africa.
Let
as
me
well.
tell you what Zimbabweans should be pushing. Instead of complaining about sanctions and it's everyone's problem, Zimbabweans, they should be, ZANU-PF, talking an African bank. They should have supported Gaddafi's vision of having an African currency. If they want to ship and move goods around, have their own currency or African currency. They should be talking along that line to say, no, establish an African bank, currency that is backed by gold, like Gaddafi was
Who
trying.
told you that they didn't support
was,
Gaddafi?
That was like, they did it because they're quiet now.
No,
Gaddafi's dead.
we
Gaddafi's
are the
dead.
only country with the
They're-
gold
they're- but
currency
they're
now.
not carrying on that.
We've got a gold currency. We're the only country with the
they're
gold
not carrying
currency in
on
Zimbabwe.
That vision.
We're the only country with the
Let's allow him, Rutendo. You've said.
Instead, you pointing fingers at everyone and say, you owe us 6 billion. These figures, they come from the sky. You owe us 7 billion. You owe us 10,000 men. South Africans have suffered the most.
How? How have you
let me
suffered?
tell you,
How many people did you lose in
It's all
apartheid?
good to talk history, what happened, what did not happen. But I'm saying in the now, South Africans, they want their country back. You know, as much as Robert Mugabe said Zimbabwe is mine, he told Tony Blair that Zimbabwe is mine. South Africans, they want their country back. They say, you know what, we've never hated these guys, even though they came here when, you know, we were on strike during the potato boycott. They brought Zimbabweans and Malawi workers to work in the fields, and here we were protesting. Our livestock was killed because we were forced to work in the mines, and foreigners just came in and took those jobs. You know, they work for the same white people, but they're saying, in spite of all that, you know, let people come into their country legally, you know, and I said,
but you were not going legally.
You know, yeah?
Luna, you were not going legally
Listen,
to our countries when we got
how many-
attacked for harboring you.
I mean, 2 people go to exile, 15 million people come
No.
here. So, and can
Let's give each other a chance,
15 million people come here and they all claim to be economic.
But they don't cause you to get attacked.
They even designed a new term called economic refugees. The term economic refugees started with Zimbabweans.
They
Prior
don't
that-
cause you to get attacked.
No, prior
Sorry,
that, no. In all the wars, when there's xenophobic clashes, it is South Africans who are at the receiving end. They die the most, and they
How?
are displaced the most.
How?
Even when Cyril Ramaphosa went to apologize in Nigeria, it was 10 South Africans died vis-a-vis 2 foreigners.
But we lost 600,000 people in
Yeah, but
in
that's a
SADC.
number.
How many did you lose?
I can say that we lost 4 million.
Guys,
that
can I-
number
can I
is
please
coming
get
from
in
the
here?
sky. But
Can I please get in
I'm
here?
talking about the now. You know,
Sorry. If I can please come in the interest of time, the last 10, 15 minutes. I appreciate that you're speaking about the now. And I'd also like you to also touch on, you spoke about Zimbabwe looking inwards. I'd like you to also address the black South Africans who happen to support foreign businesses, who also keep voting for politicians that aren't ensuring that our laws and our immigration is being sorted. If you can please touch on what you believe the solutions would be, and then I'll allow Rutendo the same. For South Africans and for Zimbabweans as well. Or not just Zimbabweans, but all the, let's focus on the African foreigners. We'll speak about the white foreigners on another day.
Obviously, as South Africans, we need to support our own businesses. You know, we need to be loyal. As a citizen, you know, even when you employ, you know, look, you know, check, you know, do a background check, you know, and support your own fellow South African first. And when it comes to voting, look at the manifestos of those parties, what are they saying? But unfortunately, the political system as a South Africa, it's flawed, because you can vote for a party and you are told to wait for 5 years. There's no mechanism. You know, when you play soccer, if you are now in like, you know, you're not delivering, they pull you back. You know, if you advertise a certain product and say this product can do ABC, the Advertising Standard Authority, you know, can take you to court and say, no, you're lying, chief. But unfortunately, with our politics, you know, even if you've got 5 years, but the 3rd year, we realize that you cannot deliver. Like Ramaphosa promised a bullet train, you know, that you'll come up with a bullet train. We have no mechanism, you know, to call you and say, you know what, chief, you have failed. You know,
Let's talk solutions, because
Yes.
you said it's the government that should be responsible for these things.
Yes, we should also, you know, somewhere we should be lobbying that we also have those courts, you know, along voting. We must also have a court system, even post-elections. You know, if you're a government, you're a president, be it Thabo Mbeki, and you fail to deliver what you've promised us, we need to take you on a civil lawsuit, you know, and say, chief, your failures were not attributed to the markets. Not attributed. It was within your power. There was corruption. You know, you could have done ABC, but you couldn't. And therefore, you know, you need to account or pay back something. But when it comes to the issue of immigration, I'm saying it is the alpha and omega. You know, we must look at the parties that push for that there must be an order, the ZEPs must be cancelled, and if it means that you must get out of SADC treaties, must get out of this OAU, because we benefit nothing. The only people who are benefiting are those who want an open border, Cecil John Rhodes, open border, where people can exploit, go to Congo, have mines. I'm sure now he's also part of the gold mafia. You know,
No, let's not do that.
no, I don't know. You know,
Sure,
and.
sure.
And be part of the ShopRites, the Checkers of this world. I don't benefit from MTN. If MTN is making profit in Nigeria, the dividends are not declared, Game. It is only a few people like, you know, no Rupert who are earning money, and a few politicians who are lagging behind, waiting for the crumbs. So, but as a South African, you know, you're not going to be told that the rates of MTN are now lowered because in Nigeria we've sold this much. So we are not benefiting. So
You're saying the solutions is black South Africans need to buy local. Number 2, they must look at the manifestos of political parties. And we need a space where if politicians are not delivering, we should be able to recall them. Because from a foreigner's perspective, you feel like currently they are not delivering what the South African people need, which is to get rid of illegal foreigners and ensure that legal foreigners come in the right way.
And South Africans, they must be patriotic. They must love this country. And they must remember, who are our brothers. And if people are coming here with malicious intentions, like I can tell you, 10 or 9 out of 10 foreigners who are here, the intentions are not that good. They are here to outwit, to outcompete, to displace our people. That's why now, if you see a typical South African, it's squashing in a township, Umlazi, in Soweto, all the new squatter camps are not South Africans. All the CBDs are not South Africans. And if these guys are our brothers, they should be asking themselves, good, but where are the South Africans? If I'm employed here in a company, a motor industry, where all the employees are 100% Zimbabweans, Malawian, and if there's a South African, you'll be kicked out. They should be asking themselves, good, where are the locals? They're not doing that. So,
what would your solution be for? We're focusing on African foreigners that are here, legally or illegally. What would your solution be to them?
I'm focusing on all the foreigners, be it a Cyprus mafia, be it a Dutch East India mafia. South Africans, there's this whataboutism that normally when people saying, Nigerians are selling drugs, Zimbabweans are deal, people will come and say, what about this? South Africans have been fighting white foreigners. When you said we want economic transformation, we don't want that from Zimbabweans. They don't have that kind of power. We're not looking for that from a guy from Lesotho. We are addressing the people who came here in 1652 and saying, there's inequality there. The foreigners who came in 1652, we're saying, address these inequalities. So, and sometimes, or most of the time, it doesn't mean, if I'm not solving A, I can't solve B. We are fighting.
I'm asking for your message to Zimbabweans, Malawians, Mozambicans who are going to be listening to you. What is your message to them that are here?
They must go home. They must go home.
Home is hostile.
Yeah? Is there war in Malawi?
No, I don't know. I'm saying that's the argument. They say it's not
good at home. Is there war in Botswana? Is no war in Lesotho. I mean, look at Lesotho. Look at how Lesotho behaves. Lesotho is sabotaging this country through illegal means. Illegal mining. Even their government officials, they were pressurizing Gayton McKenzie to say, allow these guys to mine. Those mines are supposed to be mined by our own people. If you're coming here from a foreign country, from Lesotho, Malawi, you're saying, I'm going to add what you don't have. If you go to any other country, they'll ask, good, what is it that you bring? And then you train locals. But guys who are coming here, they are not coming up with things that we do not have. We don't have a problem with people coming here, but they must bring scarce skills.
Your solution is they must go home.
They must go home, fix their country. They must also go home. Rutendo must also go home and vote. Majority of the people that are here, they're not even voting in Zimbabwe. They don't even want to go back.
I'll ask you a question as an advocate. If we've got illegal sanctions in Zimbabwe, and those illegal sanctions are persecuting Zimbabweans to make the government look bad, do you believe that we're going to have free and fair elections with sanctions that are supposed to make the government look bad?
I'd like you to not answer. I'd like you to not answer. I'd like you to please not answer.
But we were in sanctions, Tina.
I understand, and I'd like you to not answer. The question stands. When we have a platform again, you can address it.
But I'd like you to speak solutions.
I hear you, Ike. Please. Solutions in the interest of time.
Yeah,
for South Africans and for foreigners.
I'm just going to make one point before I go into my solutions. The apartheid government fell after 6 years of sanctions because it failed. So this notion that we must copy the apartheid government and so forth, Zimbabwe has been under sanctions for 22 years, still going. So we've done better than the apartheid government. Then we've also got the only country with a gold currency at the present moment. So what are the solutions? The solutions are we have to deal with the elephant in the room that our ancestors and our forefathers were dealing with before, neocolonialism. We cannot ignore the dispossessor of land, the dispossessor of the economy, and expect to have a better South Africa and a better Zimbabwe.
These are Europeans?
Europeans.
Okay.
Europeans continue to be criminals, holding on to unjust enrichment. He knows about restitution, restituto in integrum. He knows what needs to happen. Everything that was gained and everything that was lost must be returned to black South Africans. He knows it. He knows that principle.
This is for South Africans?
Yeah, and that's a legal principle.
Okay.
Restituto in integrum. And that is something that South Africans don't want to deal with, particularly the bourgeoisies. And he is a bourgeoisie.
Let's not be personal. We'll just speak generally.
what I mean by a bourgeoisie, it's not supposed to be a derogatory remark. These are the guys who got education. These are guys who got law firms, the guys who are accountants, the guys who are chartered accountants, who are benefiting from the crumbs that fall off the table of capitalism at the expense of the guys at the bottom. So they are the ones that are protecting and defending the system. Yet, if Ike was to put the effort that he has put right now on wanting Africans to go home, in asking for restitution in Integram, he will probably be more successful to make that happen. That's point number one.
We've been asking for that for years. We've been fighting for that. I was jailed for that when I was 13.
Noted.
I've been active. And your solutions, when they always on South Africa.
Ike, let's allow him.
He
please.
knows
Let's
more.
allow him. Let's allow him, please.
He knows more in South
Let's
Africa.
allow him.
than-
You made your point that we've been fighting for
The
it. Thank you.
reason why I point at people like Ike is he's powerful. He's got a powerful voice. He's stronger than even most politicians. That's why without TV, without being given platforms just like me, his voice is still out there. That's why we're sitting here.
Correct.
So I know that with that voice, he can change so many things. Number two, we don't have to just address the issue of restitution. We need to also address the continuing apartheid now. Duduzane Zuma doesn't have a bank account. Marcela Koko doesn't have a bank account right now. The son of Cyril Ramaphosa doesn't have a bank account. The banks of this country have closed those banks' accounts because they don't want these people to be competitive. And supposedly, they've committed a crime. Bank account is a way to transact. It's a right for people to be economically active. The banks of South Africa, which are still apartheid banks that used to be part and parcel of what was called the Defense Advisory Council, that constituted the apartheid military, plus banks and the business companies that say that the army of South Africa can declare any company as a key point, and once it is identified it as a key point, it can start a militia to kill black people and to fight black people from trying to get emancipation. That is still happening now. That is still happening now. So we need solutions of people like Ike who are advocates to stand up against this banking system, to call for the bank account to be a right, and to call for the bank account not to be cancelled for any reason whatsoever, because people cannot survive without that bank account. We need people like Ike to say that these apartheid banks must be broken down because they continue to represent what they represented during apartheid. We need people like Ike to continue to call for reparations for the South African people. Because if that doesn't happen, we will continue to be in this apartheid where we are fighting for 7% of the economy. That's what we are fighting for here. Black people control 7% of the economy, while 93% of this economy is in the hands of Indians and whites, and we're busy fighting each other for the 7%, leaving the bulk of the money that is going to actually change people's lives. And then we have to understand that these little territories we've got, South Africa, Zimbabwe, Botswana, separate, will never be able to develop. So Zimbabweans, Botswanans, and people from Lesotho will always come into South Africa if it is the leading economy that dominates everything. If South Africa goes and takes the chartered accountants, it takes the scientists, it takes the business people, it takes Strive Masiwa and allows them to have bank accounts in South Africa, allows them to get citizenships in South Africa, and leave no investment in neighboring countries, those people who have got no factories, no banks, no development investment from these people will come. So we need to stop South Africa taking the most educated, the most moneyed into the economy. We need to break up the unfair competition and the monopoly that is created by apartheid companies that use the benefit of apartheid to enter into SADC and enter into other African countries. But Standard Bank have no business competing with businesses that were started by independent African countries. But Anglo-America have got no reason to continue to hold on to mining rights and ownership of companies that were built by unjust enrichment. We need those to be broken down. We need an antitrust law, and we need those antitrust laws to be created in the country where these companies exist so that they don't continue to compete with us with money laundered funds, predicate crime funds, money from slavery, colonialism that gave them so much
Can
power
I ask you a
that they
question?
dominate the
Can
entire
I ask you a
region.
question?
Yeah.
When you said these people don't have banks, you're talking about Duduzane. His father was a president. Couldn't they think of establishing black banks, rather than relying on the very same white people that they say they must fight? Because they should have done that in the first place. Now they're crying after the fact.
I agree.
Please,
and
please
I
do not
agree with
answer.
you.
Please, Rutendo.
I agree with you.
In the interest of time, please carry on with the question has been noted. Please finish with the solutions.
So we need tangible solutions. I need Ike, when he's got money in South Africa, that he cannot invest in a mine because to get a mining license in South Africa costs so much money. I need him to take the little that he has, that 100,000, that million rand, he can mine and do amazing things in Zimbabwe. We must hold each other's hands and say, Ike Nyakuzwa, but I've got opportunity in Zimbabwe. I'm a gold mafia, like he says. There's a gold rush in Zimbabwe taking place. Come through.
How do we resolve this current issue with foreigners in South Africa and South Africans wanting the foreigners to leave? Those are more the solutions I'd like now.
We need to work together. Right now, Ike cannot see value in me if I can't give him value. As long as he sees me coming to take from his country, he's not going to talk to me in any other way but anger. But the day I say to Ike, listen here, Ike, I've got some people that I work with in Zimbabwe, billionaires. Some of them were billionaires in Zimbabwe and South Africa. And they need services. And I want you to offer services to them. We are currently fighting this law and that law and that law and that law, and then this billionaire who's in Zimbabwe and operating in South Africa needs services. I need you to come and brief. Take a brief. I fly with Ike to Zimbabwe. He sits with that billionaire. He makes some money. He'll begin to get a bigger picture to this issue. Because now he's also benefiting from my economy. Now he's also benefiting with his skill from what we are doing in Zimbabwe. Right now, we're going to court in South Africa against the banks. I'm doing it with Simba Chitando. Why? Because the South Africans don't understand the issue of sanctions and the injustice, so they haven't joined us, but there's opportunity there. So we would like to bring them in.
Are you saying you'd like black South Africans to go and do business in Zim? Is that what you're saying as a potential solution?
Do business in Zim and in South Africa on issues to do with Zim. So I'm saying we've got cases in South Africa now.
I'm talking about a situation where black South Africans want foreigners gone. I'm asking what's the solution. I'm asking,
to me,
are you saying they must go do business there?
To me,
because they are waiting. They don't want to hear about Ike and billionaires. They're saying we want foreigners gone. How do you solve that for the ordinary
I've
South
already
African?
given this as a solution to say once Ike is making a bit of money in Zimbabwe, once people like Thabo Mbeki gave them as an example, there are many South Africans with mines in Zimbabwe.
Ordinary black South Africans must go make money in some of these other countries.
You've got loans that you're getting, money that you're getting, capital that Zimbabweans don't have that can allow you to enter into sectors in Zimbabwe and actually make money.
He's saying, if they took, none will come take.
And then
Sorry,
they come with indigenization, they take half of
No. You're a black person, so we won't take anything from you. And indigenization was cancelled by Mnangagwa specifically to allow Africans to invest in Zimbabwe. Khumalo was the biggest gold miner in Zimbabwe for a very long period of time. Right now, Implats is the biggest platinum miner in Zimbabwe.
But you know what's the problem? You prioritize your people first.
That's what we're doing.
You prioritize your
we've
people
got
first.
5
But here in South Africa,
minutes.
it's an open for all.
But remember,
We've got 5 minutes. We've got 5 minutes, just so you guys know.
Is give you an opportunity to take advantage of some of these resources that are in Zimbabwe that many Zimbabweans don't have capital to take advantage of. Make money from them. Once you are making money away from a system that continues to choke you, then you are able to have resources to come back and fight the system. Do you know now?
But do you know if I go to Zimbabwe to make money, but I'll be following all the protocols, all the immigration laws. That's what South Africans are saying. South Africans saying, you know what, they've never hated foreigners. They say, if you come here, can you follow all the laws? And when you're here, please behave.
And we are saying to the government of Zimbabwe,
Rutendo,
part of the solution. Part of the solution.
I'd like you guys to each 2 minutes closing, in the interest of time.
Part of the solution we've been telling the government of Zimbabwe is listen.
This is your last 2 minutes. Your last 2 minutes.
Yes.
Thank you.
Part of the solution we've been telling the government of Zimbabwe is listen here. You need to start teaching your people how to be refugees if they are refugees. And you also need to start training your people about the opportunities we've got at home that they need to come and take advantage of. So, for instance, getting a mining license in Zimbabwe is $79. Why are you struggling to be a waiter in South Africa when you can come and get a mining license and start mining? There are institutions like the Zimbabwe Miners Federation that is there to train those people on how to become a small-scale miner to become bigger. We need them to educate people that if you're going to go to South Africa, don't jump the border. If you are a refugee and you are displaced by economic conditions that Fikile Mbalula and the ANC acknowledge, go and do the process of applying so that you don't become an illegal immigrant, so that you are recognized as a refugee, and follow the process. So our government has got to start reorientating our people. Then when we make money in South Africa, those of us who can make money in South Africa, let's teach our people and encourage them to invest it back home so that we can grow the economy. And finally, we want South Africans to stop decampaigning Zimbabwe. As long as SABC continues to make Zimbabwe look like a place where people can't invest, it's going to be difficult for Zimbabweans and foreigners to invest. As long as SABC is lying about the political situation, making us look like savages, it's going to make it difficult for people to invest in Zimbabwe, create companies that are going to make Zimbabweans have somewhere to go and work. And then finally, we have to work on these sanctions. The sanctions are illegal. Everybody accepts that. If we work hard to remove those sanctions so that investment can travel into Zimbabwe, Zimbabwe can pay for medicines, they can pay for chemicals to clean water. I mean, DBSA denied Zimbabwe money to build a plant to manufacture our own chemicals to clean water. We need South African companies to stop DBSA.
South Africa.
Yes.
Thank you very much, Rutendo.
So we need South Africa to stop complying with these sanctions, to allow institutions, companies, and businesses to be built in Zimbabwe so that Zimbabweans have a place where they can get medication, clean water, healthcare, jobs, and an economy that functions.
Thank
It's
you.
amazing
All right,
that
2 minutes.
It's amazing
This
with
is your
Zimbabwe.
last 2 minutes.
It's amazing with Zimbabwe because they always blame somebody else, SAPC. It's like, Putin blaming CNN and saying, you've got RT, you've got Zimbabwe television. I mean, you've got,
But you
internet
banned
now.
RT.
Allow him Rutendo.
You've
It's his
got,
last
you've
2
got
minutes.
unlimited, information platforms where you can, push your propaganda. But all the time, DBSA, set up your own mechanism. Set up your own mechanism like the Afrikaners did. I don't know whether it's an African thing, like to be
It's a
blaming
capital thing.
blaming
It's a capital
everybody else. I mean, look at other countries, like Israel. They didn't say, we don't have water. They just go to the sea and clean water.
They got
and then,
32 billion in reparations.
Let's allow him, Rutendo.
but what I'm trying to say is that, Zimbabweans, they're always blaming everybody else, but Zimbabweans themselves, they must take accountability at some point, and say, what is it that we can do amongst ourselves, there's brick and water in Zimbabwe. Let's move these two and build, But for South Africans, I'm saying South Africans, they've never hated foreigners from day one, we call them Abuspale, but after 1994, we started getting abused because we thought that these are our brothers. They've been liberated since the 60s, 1957. They're going to teach us things that we did not know how to govern because they've been free. But when they came here, it was a different picture. They wanted to take and take and take. And worst of all, crime became worse. And then we started to wonder because now we're looking at Thomas Sankara, Patrice Lumumba, thinking, hey, our brothers will come. How we used to admire J.J. Okocha. We used to admire Peter Ndlovu,
But
the
crime
Bulawayo
reduced,
bullet.
you know that.
Let's leave it to
We
Rutendo,
used,
please.
and we thought that, guys are coming here. There was a time Gambia, in South Africa, but now we started getting irritated, because guys, they've got this entitlement culture. They started calling us stupid. They started calling us all these things that we are lazy. And most of them, they come here for institutions, education, our services were top notch, our hospitals, our
Because of
infrastructure,
apartheid.
and they start messing up our infra. I mean, today we don't have a railway. And thanks to Lesotho and Mozambicans and Zimbabweans, they've
But
chowed
you
our
believe-
Rutendo.
They've chowed the railway. They've chowed everything there. We've got load shedding. They chow cables. They don't love this country like I love this country. In fact, they had that thing, you think that you are better. You think that you are white. And that I find it offensive. If you come to another person's country, you behave. If I come to your country, I behave. South Africans, when they go to Zimbabwe, first of all, they're stopped by soldiers. They want protection fee money. They'll ask you about the car radio, reflectors and all that. But when Zimbabweans are here, they move freely. I see yellow registration, some registration from Botswana, they are free. He's talking about that you can go to Zimbabwe and mine. I doubt that South Africans, they'll be welcomed. I mean, there are few elites, ANC,
Lots.
Bomzi,
No,
Khumalo.
no.
Yeah, you're talking
Normal
about
guys.
Bomzi,
Let's
Khumalo,
finish
there
off,
are few
Ike, please.
elites. Look at when we play soccer. They even kick us like we are not brothers, and then they talk brothers. They give us hostile treatment, bad hotels, no water infrastructure, so and we thought that no.
Where
these are
is
brothers.
this way
What
now?
bad? Everywhere we play, but
No,
we get
Zimbabwe.
bad treatment, including all over Africa. From Cape to Cairo, these guys, they hate us. We were surprised. Now, Fish, they were surprised. What's going on here? There was a time when Dr. Khumalo scored a goal. A beautiful beautiful goal. He dribbled everybody. The soldiers came in.
Where?
He ran away. One of the African. He ran away out of the
Let's finish off.
It's only later they called him, but no, Baba, man. I praise Baba. Let go lead.
But we get more than 2 minutes.
He's always
More than
I'm
two
trying to
minutes.
get him to finish Rutendo.
Yeah, because we're always afraid.
But Ike, before you finish. do you
Rutendo,
know-
no, unfortunately not. Unfortunately not.
One word. Ike, do you know that the murder rate and the crime rate have all reduced ever since 1994? I want you to look at that.
We'll
And there's an
research that.
advocate. I think you already know that.
I'd like to thank
know.
both of you gentlemen.
Thanks
I'd like
to
to thank both of you gentlemen. Rutendo Matinyarare from Zimbabwe, Ike Khumalo from South Africa. Everyone who was listening to this conversation, we look forward to hearing some of your thoughts, your comments. Please feel free to ask more questions. I believe these gentlemen will be in the comments to answer some of them. And some of them that are not answered in the comments, I will try my best to get them to sit down again soon so that we can tackle this thing, because I think it's fundamentally important. We love this continent. A lot of us love our countries. Yes, we're dealing with a lot of colonial issues that we've inherited, and these are some of the consequences that we're dealing with. But thank you very much for tuning in, and we'll catch up with you guys again soon. Cheers.